In Ready or Not 2, a council of 6 ruling families controls the global infrastructure. To maintain their seat at the table, they've made a pact with an ancient entity known as the Baal, who demands ceremonial offerings in exchange for absolute power. While most will call this a dark horror fantasy, the film's depiction of elite families meeting in secluded locations to commit the unthinkable feels less like fiction and more like a mirror. With everything being revealed in the world as of late, the idea of a hidden council ruling with no consequences sounds more believable than ever. Is this just a horror movie, or is it a reflection of the power structures we see in plain sight? Today, we're breaking down the 6 ruling families of Ready or Not 2 and revealing the interesting connections to the world we live in. Ready or Not 2 picks up right after Grace escaped the Ladamus estate, revealing that the wedding game was just a small part of a much larger system. It turns out the Ladamus family belonged to an elite organization called the Council of Six, a global board of directors that have governed the world's infrastructure since the 1700s. After barely surviving the first film, Grace wakes up in a hospital bed thinking her nightmare is finally over. But it was only getting started. She is taken directly from her hospital bed because the Council of Six has come for revenge. Remember, in the last film, Grace was chosen by the entity Baal as a ceremonial offering. When she survived, the entity took the Ladamus family in her place. Now, the remaining council faces total extinction unless they finish what the Ladamus family failed to do. Grace is brought to a high-end resort where she must survive as the elite families pursue her one by one. If they fail to provide her to Baal, their entire global empire, banks, media, and food chains collapse overnight. In this film, the entity is revealed as an ancient sentient force that provides the gift of rule in exchange for a great sacrifice. The families don't just worship him, they are legally bound by a contract that is absolute. To claim the high seat, they must capture Grace before dawn. The film reaches a chilling climax at a hidden underground altar. To save her sister, Grace is forced into a ritual wedding with a high-ranking member. But in a final act of defiance, Grace uses the very familial blood pact they forced her into to take control. By casting the high seat into a pit of the dead, she triggers a total collapse of the surviving elites. The game is over, and the power structure is finally dismantled. As far-fetched as this movie might seem on the surface, believe it or not, the underlying message is not that far off from what we see in the world today. While the first film focused on the isolated madness of a single elite family, this sequel forces us to look at something most people completely overlook. It's not just about one person or one rogue group, it's about an entire system. It has long been observed by historical analysts that much of our global infrastructure is influenced by a very small, concentrated group of powerful dynasties. While there might not be exactly 6 families in every specific boardroom, many do believe that a handful of ancient old money structures exert a silent control over the world. Ready or Not 2 provides a chilling cinematic representation of these ruling families and the specific contracts they supposedly signed to secure their thrones. It suggests that this system is not only real, but that they have been required to perform unthinkable sacrificial acts to maintain that level of dominance. The film also portrays these families as part of a closed-door ceremonial organization, a concept that mirrors exactly what many believe is the true price of admission for absolute power. In the movie, it is called the Council of Six, but for those who have been paying attention to the world lately, we all know exactly which power structures they are referring to. We have heard all the accounts of individuals who appear to trade their personal lives or even their own kin for high-level success, whether that be for status in the entertainment industry or to be accepted into the highest circles of influence. This film suggests that reaching the top requires a cost most of us could never imagine paying. The Council of Six in Ready or Not 2 is more than just a fictional villain group. It represents a brotherhood of influence that operates entirely beyond the reach of the law. While the film uses a ritualistic game as a narrative device, the core idea of an untouchable network is something that has been detailed in several high-profile documents released over the last year. These records suggest that beneath the surface of our public institutions, there are private agreements and shadow networks that have existed for generations. In the movie, this brotherhood is bound by an ancient contract, but in our world, the evidence points to a system of institutionalized secrecy where wealth and lineage create a protected class. By framing this as a horror thriller, the film is essentially inviting the audience to look at the patterns found in these real-world records and question the true structure of power. One of the most interesting aspects of Ready or Not 2 isn't the Pact with the Devil trope, but the specific name of the entity that governs the entire system, Baal. For the casual viewer, It is just a spooky name for a horror movie monster. But for those who study the history of power and the underlying mechanics of our world, this is an undeniable signal hiding in plain sight. When you rearrange the letters or look at the phonetic roots, you find a direct link to the ancient deity known as Baal. In historical and theological texts, Baal was often referred to as the Lord or Master of the earth. He wasn't just the god of the sky. He was the god of fertility, wealth, and the harvest. To the ancient Phoenicians and Canaanites, Baal was the one you went to if you wanted your kingdom to prosper. But this prosperity was never a gift. It was a transaction. Historical records and archaeological finds describe a very specific and dark requirement for maintaining this favor: the sacrifice of the most precious to ensure the continuation of power. This is exactly what the film is showing us with the Council of Six. In the movie, the families don't just worship Baal, they are in a legally binding multi-generational contract with him. If they fail to provide the ceremonial offering, their entire global infrastructure, the banks, the media, and the energy grids collapse instantly. This mirrors the ancient tradition of the pact, where a ruling class is granted absolute dominion over the physical world in exchange for a debt that must be paid. When you look at the high seat ring in the movie, it represents the seal of authority that has allegedly been passed down through these elite bloodlines for thousands of years. The film suggests that the world we see is just a great game managed by these 6 sectors of control, all serving the same ancient entity under different modern names. You have to ask yourself why the writers chose to reveal the entity's true form and name so clearly right now in 2026. This is what many call thematic programming. By placing these ancient names into a fictional horror movie, the truth of how these elite networks function is often minimized in the eyes of the public. If someone tries to speak about the real-world influence of these ancient traditions, they are often dismissed because people associate those concepts with the plot of a horror movie. But the historical documents found throughout our own history tell a different story. They speak of a brotherhood of influence that operates with the same mass, the same rituals, and the same absolute secrecy seen in Ready or Not 2. The film is showing us that the high seat isn't just about money. It's about a hierarchy that views the rest of humanity as mere commoners to be used in their ceremonies. The name Baal serves as a linguistic signature. In many high-level circles, using a variation of an ancient name is a way of signing the work. It's a signal to those in the know that the story being told is grounded in a specific tradition of power. By analyzing the connections to Baal, we are peeling back the layer of fiction to see the blueprint beneath. The Council of Six isn't a new idea. It is the modern evolution of an ancient structure that has never truly gone away. It has simply traded its stone altars for boardroom tables and high-end resorts. When you see the protagonist being prepped for the ceremony in the film, it serves as a modern metaphor for the same ancient powers. In the past, being cast out of the favored circle meant physical exile. Today, as the film suggests, it means the deletion of your bank accounts, your identity, and your ability to function in society. By framing this as an ancient contract with Baal, this movie is telling us that the technology may have changed, but the masters and the requirements have stayed exactly the same. The Council of Six is simply the modern face of a very old agreement, and the film is inviting us to look past the mask to see the documents that signed it all into existence. If the name is real and the rituals match the historical records, at what point do we stop calling this a movie? The writers of Ready or Not 2 are essentially handing us a map. They are showing us that the true high seat of power isn't found in a government building, but in the private retreats where these contracts are renewed. By grounding the entity in the history of Baal, they're acknowledging that this system predates our modern laws and operates on a level that most people are too afraid to even acknowledge. It is a system of absolute control, hidden behind the guise of a wedding game. But as we've seen from recently released records and documents, the reality of these secret networks is far more integrated into our daily lives than we ever suspected. As we watch Grace and Faith walk away from the remains of the Danforth Resort, we have to realize that the high seat isn't just a prop in a horror movie. It represents a reality that is becoming increasingly visible in our own world. In Ready or Not 2, the victory wasn't about winning the game or capturing the ring. It was about the absolute refusal to participate in a system built on ancient hidden contracts. The film concludes with the destruction of those who spent their entire lives fighting for a seat at a table that was never meant for them to truly own. This is the ultimate lesson of the story. The power of the Council of Six only exists as long as the world believes their rules are absolute. What we've explored today, from the linguistic signature of Baal to the modern application of social priming, shows us that the Great Game is moving into its most aggressive phase. But as the movie suggests, these structures are far more fragile than they appear. They rely on our silence and our willingness to accept their normalization of these themes. The documents and records we've discussed throughout my recent videos prove that these networks are not invincible. They are simply hidden behind a veil of entertainment. When you leave this video, I want you to look at the world through a different lens. The writers of Ready or Not 2 have given us the blueprint, and now it's up to us to recognize the patterns that are easily spotted. In fact, this pattern is found in several movies, just like we saw in Late Night with the Devil. I think a video on movies secretly about Mr. LaBelle will be an important one. If you want to see that, comment part 2 below, and if enough of you are interested, I'll make sure that's the very next video. If you found value in this deep dive, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to join the truth movement. In an era where reach is often restricted and voices are quietly sidelined, your engagement is the only thing that keeps this information moving. The times are changing, but the reality behind the curtain remains consistent. If you're interested in seeing how these inner system rituals truly work, make sure to check out my breakdown on the movie Late Night with the Devil right now. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.